This week on the Weekly Reid.
How would you describe your relationship to your art?
I struggle in and out with certain substances, and I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of in moderation, so to speak. Like, I make sure to keep it in check.
And shout out to HBC.
Yeah, huge shout out to HBC. Listen to the music.
Today's episode of the Weekly Reid features Philadelphia artist Scratch Williams, and I'm so excited to have him here because he did a picture of me a few months ago that is so good. He's here to talk about art versus the artist, how drugs might play a role in how he creates, and so much more. That being said, it is my pleasure to welcome my next guest, Scratch Williams. So thank you so much for being on my show.
Of course.
Can you just introduce yourself and tell everybody why you're here?
Yeah, my name is Scratch Williams. I'm a visual artist, and I'm here to talk about art and anything else that might come up in the time.
Okay, so can you explain where you got the name Scratch from?
Yeah, it's an old video game for the Xbox 360. Some might remember it. It's called Alan Wake. It's a really artsy game. It's like the premise is essentially you're a writer, you have writer's block, you go to this cabin. This cabin is magical in the sense that it imbues creative power with the sense of, I guess you can manifest things through your art.
Nice.
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes on in that, but Scratch is a character, Mr. Scratch is a character that represents his shadow self, I guess.
Okay.
And only comes out when he's really in his head. And I really resonated with that when I was younger, just because I was really interested in Carl Jung's theory of psychology. So I was like, ooh, that right there.
Okay.
So yeah, I was Scratch for a long time, and then I kind of implemented the Williams to make it easier to put a first and a last name.
Yeah, I thought that was your last name. So.
Yeah, most people do.
Really clever.
Thank you.
So I had an interview last Friday, and I'm just going to ask you one of the questions that they asked me since you are a visual artist.
Okay.
So one of the things that they asked me was how would I describe the color yellow to a blind person?
Ooh, I would say bright, but that also kind of, yeah. I would say it's more of a feeling of happiness and warmth.
Okay.
But I feel like that also makes you think of orange. But happiness and warmth is
they're in the same family.
They're together.
Yeah.
They're working alongside each other.
So how did you decide that you wanted to be an artist?
I've just been doing it my whole life.
Okay.
Probably the earliest back I can remember is probably around 5.
Oh wow.
I used to just draw stupid kid stuff. And then my mom was always the one to be like, you're great, keep doing that.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, it's a phase, it'll pass. And I just kind of kept doing it. And through high school, it was kind of there were periods for me where I just lost interest and was like, I gotta focus on real drawing. But as I kind of progressed and thought stuff out, it became really easy for me to understand myself better through visual interpretation of my thoughts and dreams and stuff. So it just became something that I fell in love with again. And it's really, at this point, starting to become me and not several influencing points that make a new thing, so to speak.
Right. Well, your work is so interesting. You drew a picture of me, which I absolutely love. I get so many compliments on it even still.
I'm glad.
Yeah, so how do you put stuff together like that in your head? I've seen you warp some crazy shit together, and I'm like, how did he make that look like it belongs there?
I don't really intend it that way. The best I can explain it is at some point, working with images long enough, you get an intuitive feeling for them.
Okay.
If you work with measurements long enough, you can look at a segment of rope, let's say, and go, that's a foot. And then you can take out a measuring tape and be like, oh wow, that's basically
there, right there.
Yeah, it's a foot. So it's the same sort of thing. When I layer images, so I'll put something down and then it used to be more of a planning thing for me, but now it's much more of just I feel like that would be good, and then I feel like this would go well with that.
And it's just the feeling.
And it just works out for the most part, yeah. And sometimes it's terrible, but you don't get to see those.
Yeah, right. So how do your experiences fuel your art, would you say?
Mostly it's, most of my work right now is self-portraiture.
Okay.
So it's, at this point for me, it's almost entirely about understanding who I am and who I'm becoming. So I wouldn't say it's so much external experiences so much as it is past and present experiences that I'm just kind of like not developing, like trying to understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I used to draw a lot too.
Yeah.
I feel like I was really good up until I kind of stopped. Like you, I kind of fell out of love with it,
That's
and
what
then
happens.
I never like picked it back up, and I really wish that I would have. So, do you ever think about like what your life might be like if you maybe had continued to? I guess that's where we put it. If you had stopped and just never picked it back up.
Not at all. I've been the rebellious type, I guess.
Oh,
and
same. Wow.
yeah,
Same.
I mean, well, for a long time, a lot of people in my life tried to tell me, like at one point, like it was really bad, and I had like 5 of my closest friends at the time sit me down in a Starbucks in daytime in public and argue with me for probably an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh.
How I could not make it work, like how art was not going to work out, how if I pursued this, I would be. It was a lot. Homeless, without
Wait, they
money.
said that to
Yes,
you?
oh, it was bad. This is why I put the quotes for
Yeah.
the friends. But yeah, they were trying to tell me that I couldn't take care of a family, that I couldn't pursue my real dreams, that I'd always be stuck where I was currently at. And this is in high school, so at the time I was just like trying to process that, but it's not that I've known for a while that it would work out, it's just that I've wanted it to, and I've put the work into it, and for the first time ever, it's actually starting to work out in the sense that I'm paying my rent with it. I don't have a job other than art right now, which is...
Wait, so what's that like?
It's amazing and incredibly depressing at the same time.
Okay.
It's more of an anxiety sort of thing, just because I know that I don't have someone to tell me, hey, you gotta come in at this time, work till this time, and you get a guaranteed pay of this. Sometimes it's, I have to work on something and I might not sell it, and I have to accept that I might not sell it, and that is hard for me to do personally. So ultimately I just do it, and if it doesn't work out, I move on, and I've been doing that and it's been working out, so I feel like that's the formula for me.
Right. So would you call yourself a struggling artist?
Sure. I feel like all artists are struggling in some way or another.
I completely agree.
I think the financial aspect of it is just the unfortunate focal point for most people. They see that as like the primary struggle, and to some degree it is, just because money equals food, shelter,
And everything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So I feel like it's more of a struggle to accept that I can't control these things, and I have to not worry about it. And that's the hardest part for me, because I am an incredibly anxious person.
Me too. I feel like we're here.
That's good.
I feel like we're here with it, because I do modeling.
Okay.
And like that's not guaranteed like paid all the time either. So I completely understand. Thankfully, I'm not having to pay my bills right now, but I completely understand. Like one month I could get like a super big job, but like I might not hear about anything for a couple weeks or a couple months. So it does make it. Freelancing is very difficult.
Incredibly, yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever put your pieces in galleries or anything?
Not anything that I would consider noteworthy. I've had like the Rec Philly did the William Street Common thing a couple times.
Okay.
So I was there for a couple of those. I've put up my work for a couple of HBC events, but nothing really that I would consider like a gallery show.
Yeah. And shout out to HBC.
Yeah, huge shout out to HBC. Listen to the music. For me, at this point, I don't want to until I know that it's something that I believe verifies the quality of my work. And I don't even know if it's there yet, the quality.
I think it is, personally.
I appreciate that. I feel like it's a personal standard for me. A lot of people really resonate with it, which is really cool. I didn't think that would happen.
Yeah.
I thought that it would for a long time, it was just really confusing to people, and they'd look at it and they'd be like, I don't understand what you're trying to convey. And now I'm getting so many people who I've never met who are like, wow, I really got this sort of vibe and this emotion and this thought from it. And I'm like, perfect.
Right.
That's what I was going for.
So do you leave your pieces open to interpretation? Like if somebody comes up to you and is like, I saw this, are you ever like in your head, I didn't see it that way, but that's cool that you got it that way, or like you're completely off?
For me, it's usually I've never had someone be completely off. It's usually within the realm of what I'm trying to discuss.
Okay.
But it's incredibly introspective. So for me, it's like, I don't really mind if people take it the way that they do. The only real issue I have with the way people take it is when they have no idea what's going on, and then I just feel like either I'm a failure on that end or someone didn't read into it enough.
Yeah.
Well, I put a lot of purpose in my work in the sense that I plan everything.
Right.
It's not, I try to be organic with it, and that's really where I'm struggling currently, is just to do it without planning it, but at this point it's just impossible. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
I look at it and I can't help but plan. Like, where would this go best? Like, so when someone looks at my work and they're like, I don't get it, I'm like, well, it can mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
Everything there has a reason to be there, so.
Yeah. So recently I've saw people say things about your work like, oh, you should buy it before, like, he's charging like thousands of dollars. How does that make you feel?
Good, because I've been telling this to people for like years, and for a while it was just like putting that energy out there.
Yeah.
And now it's finally to the point where the work is starting to present itself in a real way.
Yeah.
And I love it personally, and it's the truth.
Right.
Some people think that I'm just being weird about it, but I'm not. I genuinely want people who buy my work to look at it in 3 years and go, wow, I bought this for $300 and now it's worth $3,000.
Yeah.
I want there to be a return on people's profit. I want people to be able to invest in me, because it is that at the end of the day. It's not like, a lot of people treat art as a product.
Okay.
And it is a product, but it's also a personal investment, like buying shares to some degree. You're investing in something that you feel connected to, and also that you can see becoming special to everyone.
Yeah. So your pieces are typically pretty like trippy-ish.
Yes.
And I know one of the topics that you brought to my attention off air on Instagram was the role that drugs might play in the creative process. So can you just speak a little on that?
Yeah. I struggle in and out with certain substances, and I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of in moderation, so to speak. Like, I make sure to keep it in check. And I'm not trying to imply that substances make or break an artist, because they don't. But I view them as tools at this point. They're definitely ways of opening up the way you think or look at things. And if you're already a creative person, or you have your own like creative way of thinking, it can help you reevaluate your sober way of looking at it.
Okay.
So for me, I use substances as a way to kind of get out of my own way, so to speak. Personally, right now, it's mushrooms with me.
Okay.
Just because I refuse, not even refuse, I can't look at myself in a biased way. I feel like an outsider looking at myself and judging myself from the perspective of someone who isn't me.
Okay.
And that helps me look at myself and my work from a perspective that is entirely new and hard to do when you're like putting on that like facade, so to speak. And that's everyone, but the hard part is getting out of your own way, I guess.
Right. So have you ever done a comparison, and I guess compare and contrast? Have you ever compared your work to when maybe you're sober versus when you
all the time
are? Okay. And do you notice a difference?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I notice a difference in the way that I came to the conclusion.
Okay.
Not so much the visual way that I create it, because I create most of my work sober. Like the actual creation part. The ideas that form the work I create while under the influence of stuff.
Okay.
So for me, it's a way of like I'll analyze things very robotically, I want to say. When I'm sober, and when I'm not, I analyze them very fluidly, and it takes a while to get to the point where your fluid thoughts are something tangible and usable. Sometimes it's just muddled garbage, but yeah, there's definitely a difference, not in the visual, but in the thought process.
Okay, so what is your thoughts on how people will typically try to get artists to sell their work for less than it's worth, or less than the artist thinks it's worth, or even give it away for free? How do you feel about that?
That's a hard one. I would say at certain times, I think it's important to compromise in order to put work out.
Okay.
I feel the problem lies in getting stuck in that compromise.
Okay.
Because when you show people that, oh, I'm selling this for this price, let's say like $50 for like a portrait or something, when that becomes your normal, people
expect
expect it to be the normal, and then when you go, okay, well, this is actually worth 200 and not $50, people don't reciprocate that.
Right.
And part of the way to get out of that is ignoring people and being firm on it until people realize that it is worth that. But that directly correlates to the amount of work you're putting in and the growth you're putting in. People aren't going to want to pay $50 for a portrait one day and then the same portrait for $200 the next.
Right.
But if it's a completely different, new, more advanced thing, they might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I've noticed about artists, because I used to paint, and I know my mom, for example, she's an artist too. She makes greeting cards. It's very easy to kind of feel like, what am I trying to say? It's easy to feel like you're not necessarily like your work isn't as worth as much as it really is. So do you think you felt that way before too?
Oh, 100%. It got to the point for me where, well, for a while, my mom was kind of a problem about this in the sense that she was like, oh, this is worth hundreds. And
my mom's the same way.
well, looking back, it just wasn't. It was not good. And I felt that way about it at the time, but her telling me that made me go, yeah, you know what it is. And after probably a year and a half of just not being able to sell anything at that price, I had to reevaluate the way I was creating. And that's usually what it boils down to for me. If it's worth $300 and you know it's worth $300, it's not just you who's going to notice. People will notice too. And some people, you know, are trying to cut you a deal or whatever, but for the most part, when it's worth what you think it's worth, people will see that too.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So what do you think your favorite pieces are that you've done? Or do you have any?
The most recent one.
Okay.
I go through a cycle of hatred for most of the things that I create.
Like most artists do. I feel like that's very common.
Yeah. I don't have anything really from the past that I enjoy. And that's been something that like has been really helpful, but also it's been helpful in the sense that it's that healthy dose of pessimism. So I look towards what I'm going to create, not what I have created.
Right.
Usually after a month to 2 months, I get sick of what I just made. So the most recent thing that I did is called Always in the Back of My Head, and that's my favorite
right
now.
So is there an average time that it takes you to complete a piece? Because your line work is very intricate.
Thank you. It's usually around a week.
Okay.
Sometimes longer. Sometimes I start something and then actually a lot of times I start something and I'm just like, I don't like that anymore, and I just stop doing it entirely, and then maybe I'll come back and finish it later. Usually I just repurpose imagery that I don't like anymore though.
Okay.
So if I don't like something I'm working on in the moment, I'll find a place for it, you know, a month down the line in something different.
Okay, because I was about to ask you repurpose.
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. I think recycling your work is incredibly beneficial. I think it allows you to re-context what you've already made, and you can do it properly and you can do it poorly. It really just depends, I think, on the purpose that you're putting into it.
Right.
Because sometimes, you know, you're just like, well, it looks good. And I think that can be beneficial for the image as a whole, especially if you have like a space that needs to be filled. But when it comes to what you're trying to discuss and talk about and convey to people, there needs to be purpose.
Yeah. So color is a huge part of what makes art. I know you don't always use color, but when you do, how do you decide what colors that you're going to use?
I am in my blue period right now.
I've noticed.
Yeah.
There are a lot of blues, a lot of purples.
I like the cold colors just because I really like the cold and the dark.
So it's that as simple as you just like.
For now, yeah. It mainly I use color to convey the emotion of the work, and most of my work feels blue. Not in necessarily a sad way, just in a muted kind of soft way.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've noticed, and it's very interesting that you say that, because last week's show was hugely about energy, and the color blue/violet, anything in that field actually has the highest vibrational frequency.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I learned that last week, I guess, on my show too. So that's really interesting that you said that. Now I don't necessarily know all of what that means, but
sounds good.
yeah, because I think a lot of the time when people think of the color blue, they think of sadness, but for me, I don't. Blue's actually my favorite color. So
me too.
Yeah, so I really appreciated, your use of it in work, because I feel like a lot of people don't use that color purposely. They don't use like blues, or they don't use blacks.
I feel people stray away from stuff that isn't as bright. They don't want to come off as like depressing.
Yeah.
Which is weird to me. But
Yeah.
it's, it's whatever.
So how would you describe your relationship to your art?
It depends. For the most part, my relationship is I use it purely as a tool
Okay.
to kind of grow. I have a personal philosophy that the only real purpose of living is to grow in who you are and become a better version of you every day.
Okay.
And for me, art is, for the most part, a subjective way for me to observe that. And it helps me kind of put my feelings and my thoughts in a visual place. I'm a very visual person, obviously.
Yeah.
So I just thought about that. So for me, it's just easier to compartmentalize them that way.
Okay.
I can better understand myself when I can see it on paper.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you work with any other mediums?
Mostly canvas, linen, and paper.
Okay.
Or on canvas, linen, and paper. I like oil paint. I've made some really colorful oil paintings, but it's usually not for me. It's usually for a commission or something.
Okay.
I have a couple that I'm working on now that are going to be really cool when they're done, but yeah, it's mostly markers, pens, and Copics right now.
Okay. I love Copics.
I love them too.
Yeah.
I've always been into like manga as a kid, and I always wanted to learn, and then I never really got around to it, and now I'm finally doing that, which is, I think, a perfect time for me, just because it's not so much I'm adopting the style, more so that I'm incorporating the elements of the style. But yeah, I like bold lines. I
love your line work so
Thank you.
much. Oh my god.
I used to just exclusively work in black pen on white paper, just because I really like the contrast between light and dark in that way. I think it really makes conveying a visual message easier.
Okay.
And I only really picked up color because I had a lot of people in my life telling me it's hard to relate because there's no color. And then it's, I grew on me, so it's
Yeah. So the last point that we're going to talk about is another thing that you brought up to me when we were talking, and that's the art versus the artist. What did you mean by that?
We're at a time, I feel like, where we are seeing a lot of artists who turn out to be questionable people, but who make good art. And this has been like a real struggle for me. The concept of separating an art from an artist, and like that fine line between justifying someone's behavior and saying, well, they did make good art.
Right.
And I still feel like a hypocrite on that issue, just because
everything that's going on with
Kanye, Temptation.
Yeah.
Who else can I think of off the top of my head? Brian Giles.
Oh yeah, I just recently saw that.
That's a big one, honestly. I've had issues with his work before though, so it's more of like, to me it's more of how I relate to the content.
Okay.
But I'm also very vocal about how I don't support them as a person. Like if I met, Kanye's a different story because I honestly can't tell if he's bad or if he's just really playing the game well at this point.
I think a lot of people feel that way.
And I mean, the whole Jeff Sessions thing is really, the fact that Trump said he'd overrule the prison reform thing is interesting. If that ends up happening, I'm like, well, he did more than anybody else. And to me, if the hat made it work, it might be something that I'm willing to look past, but it's just hard for me to see past it, just because the way he's playing the game, it seems so evil, I guess. I don't know. It's hard for me.
Very sinister.
Yeah, and I don't know. I want to believe in Kanye so bad. So I feel like it's a time will tell sort of thing. But I think it's just important to be vocal about the things that people, to not deny the bad things that people do because of their art.
Right.
It's not easy, but I feel like that's the defining line there. When you say, well, I don't support abusive behavior and I don't support, this and that, but the art touches me. It resonates with me, and I can't just say it doesn't because of how I feel about the person.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that was all the questions I had for you. Is there anything left that you wanted to say?
No. It's pretty good.
Any advice that you'd like to give?
Oh God. Never listen to anyone else, and don't let yourself lie to yourself. If you want it, you can do it. You have to put in the work though, and everyone says that, but it's true. If the work's not there, you will just be lying to yourself until it's too late, and then that's not fun for anyone.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being on my show. I
It's
had
a
a great
pleasure.
time. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back next week with my friend Carl/Baskey, however he's feeling next week. And he's going to be talking about art as well, but he's going to be talking about the importance of Black art. So it should be another great show. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and that's a wrap.